relations and help all of our peoples know more about each other than they currently do.
Frankly, Mr. Ambassador, we lack the trained men who would be able to plan and implement operations in an area we think is vitally important. Because of this, we are also requesting that your team of advisors include a senior officer who is thoroughly experienced in psychological operations.
Very well, sir. I think we can provide you with an expert on the subject.
He is concerned with its people, their way of life, their religion, their culture, their sense of national identity, or lack of it. He must know the people of Hostland, for their minds will be his primary objective. He reviews the psychological objectives the United States hopes to achieve in Hostland. Once the people start to consider themselves as a national group, acceptance of their government tends to increase, thus making penetration by subversives much more difficult. Psychologically, the people must be convinced that if it were not for the insurgents, these restrictions would not be necessary, and that when insurgent activities cease, restrictions will be removed. As the people are affected by the program, so the program is affected by their changes in attitudes. A successful PSYOP program will make them perceive things from the desired viewpoint. What thoughts will pass through his mind? What images will he see? What factors will push him in one direction or another?
When you run the world, you tend to study how other people have run the world. Just like if you run a successful business, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you might study other business models. The people that currently run the world studied how the people before that ran the world and now want to create a scientific dictatorship. And that means they want permanent and total control over the world forever, so they never have to worry about revolutions again. So oligarchies have always been worried about revolution, always been worried about the people revolting. Oligarchies even popularized the idea of exile back in the 1200s, 1300s, where if the King of France got deposed, then he or she could go to England. And if the King or Queen of England got deposed, they would be exiled to France. So oligarchies were so worried about the people rising up in rebellion that they popularized the idea of exile to make that normal and make that an accepted thing you do to make sure you didn't kill your royal family who was a part of your country's history. Incrementally, they condition us to say that it's none of our business to look into things like giant multilateral trade deals that will affect every area of our society. They make it seem like it's not our responsibility. We have experts to take care of that. And the less we control our environments, the more apathetic we get.
Placing the frog in a pot of cool water where the frog is very comfortable, and you gradually turn up the heat so that you don't, the change in heat is imperceptible until, of course, the pot is boiling, and then it's too late to do anything about it. That's what's happening now. So gradually, step by step, and gradualism is a process that Karl Marx talked about. This is right out of the Communist Manifesto, that if you move in baby steps, they're imperceptible. People simply don't take notice.
Would you prefer to follow a careful, incremental, small, step-by-step approach, or prefer a bolder vision for the future and to design and pursue that vision? And an overwhelming majority of both Canadians and Americans said yes to the bolder vision. And the people, I think, are ready. The way I interpret the polls is not that they want a North American Union, but they are quite pragmatic about different ways to relate to each other and open to new configurations in North America.
They learned long ago that you cannot just take it by brute force. I mean, when Hitler tried to do it, just take it by brute force, it doesn't work. The people will always prevail. So they've learned their lesson, and they realize that now you have to do it through stealth, through things like propaganda and controlling the media and the education system, and basically turn it around so that the people are in complete and total acquiescence, that they will literally beg for their own enslavement.
By doing incrementally these changes in our laws and our land, then one day we'll all wake up and say, oh, that's just the way it is. but it was not supposed to be that way. You can come across a border with an army with all of your military machinery, and people say, oh my gosh, we're being attacked. But right now we're being attacked, but incremental changes is a way that people don't see that the arrows and bullets and guns and cannons are blazing at us, and we don't recognize that.
So most people aren't aware because of what they've learned from the media and what they learned in school. And it's amazing how quick information spreads these days. So that's probably why people have such a hard time waking up sometimes, because the conditioning runs deep.
If you get into an elevator and there's 20 people on the elevator and 19 of them are facing the back of the elevator, well, by social conformity, although the right thing to do is to face the front of the elevator because that's where the door is open, to fit in with the greater crowd, you turn around and face the back. Don't know why, but this is what seems to be the status quo.
When you have incremental damage and it keeps increasing, you can wake up one morning and realize that something has to be done.
Well, you get political change of fundamental nature of this sort only if you have a real big earth-shaking event. 9/11 was an earth-shaking event. The Great Depression was such an event. 2 world wars costing millions and millions of lives and casualties among European countries was such an event. They drive changes. The European Monetary Union was the outgrowth of people who lived through at least one of those wars to try to avoid it in the future.
Precisamente yo estaba pensando anoche que cuando hay desastres, huracanes o algo así, los aprovechados son los que tienen el dinero y al pobre nunca le llega nada.
Y probablemente no, porque tú sabes que los más ricos en tiempos de crisis se llaman. Nosotros seguimos haciendo la lucha por la subsistencia cotidiana. Solo es eso.
Well, I certainly agree that it's when periods of great instability and chaos, you have the greatest opportunity for creating new institutions and moving in new directions.
I think it is obvious from any study of history, world history, that the greatest initiatives have usually originated from some crisis of some sort. The United States Marshall Plan would have been unthinkable after World War I, but after World War II, we were prepared to give a substantial amount of money both to winners and losers to help them to recover. It was quite a dramatic, and it really did require a crisis, a dual crisis, one the end of the Second World War, and the second the prospect of Soviet invasion of Western Europe. I think we needed a crisis to have Social Security, to have the Works Progress Administration.
In 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt put his signature on the Social Security Act.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection to 30 million of our citizens who will reap direct benefit through unemployment compensation, through old age pensions, and through increased services for the protection of children and the prevention of ill health.
There's no doubt that steps that many people think would be desirable are extremely difficult to do in the absence of some moment in which people can step back and see that fundamental change is required.
Robert Pastor and Allan Gotlieb, they both expressed their beliefs that the greatest initiatives come out of disasters. Do you believe in this order out of chaos theory? Given that the European Union was born out of 2 world wars, do you think that North America would require some sort of a catalyst to push us towards this North American community?
Well, I don't see any. First of all, I don't know what kind of catalytic event it would take. I don't see any interest in building a kind of common superstructure in North America, either political or even economic. I don't see a monetary union. None of that is on the horizon at all, as far as I can see. I don't know what it would take for it to come about. The recent events in the financial world are certainly going to drive more cooperation and collaboration around financial sector regulation.
If, as part of your goal, is to integrate economies, we call it deep economic integration, and integrate their economic structures, then countries don't want to give up their economic structures freely. And if things are going well for the people, and they say, well, thank you for offering us this Amero or North American Union or one common currency across the North American continent, but we're happy with where our economy now, we're happy with our own currency, and we don't need any help right now. But if you throw a man or a country into quicksand, and then all of a sudden they'll clutch at straws, and the straw that they'll clutch at, you already have for them, but they won't reach for it unless you create the crisis and put them in there.
I agree with many people who say, well, the idea for an Amero is just fantasizing, because there simply is not the political will that existed in Europe. And I say, that's right. I fully agree. But as an academic, I'm supposed to be thinking ahead of what can be done, what should be done, rather than just always accepting the current situation as it is.
If you want to move a population as a whole and galvanize their common thinking as a one galvanized response, and we all agree this, then they give you their will freely to go take them to where you already want to go. If you throw them in that quicksand and then you pass them that straw, and a drowning man will grab at anything, and they're drowning us.
I've been paid very generously all my life, being a professor, devoting myself to putting out these ideas. And my hope is that eventually, if there is a major catastrophe, there will be enough people around who will say, well, this may be the time to try out this new idea. Whether this ever happens, I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, I've done my job of introducing these ideas into the public domain, and now it's up to your generation of young people, the next generations, to see whether it's worth it or not.
It's a process that they've been using for thousands of years. It's basically order out of chaos, and the idea that death breeds life. They believe if you can cause enough pain and wars and suffering, then out of the ashes of that will emerge their solution to this problem that they created, which is their solution would be oneness, one world, everything. It's also known as the Hegelian dialectic, where you set up the thesis, you also set up the antithesis, so that you can offer your synthesis to the very problem and opposition that you created in the first place.
I mean, that's exactly what these people even talk about. It's the Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. They cause the problems to happen. You react to it, and you go towards something that they already set up for you from the beginning. And that's how they get what they want, because they understand they can't just get rid of the Constitution. They can't just obliterate your rights. They can't just destroy this economy. They have to think of a plan to do it.
Real freedoms are eaten up a little at a time, while government controls are slipped on, while the real power is collected into a few hands. Where government is not limited, no man is free. Change limited government to unlimited government, and our rights would be only what the master planners say they are. No longer the servant of the people, government would be the master of the people. That's the way to change what we have, take all power and all freedoms away from the people, and collect everything into the hands of one small group with absolute power.
9/11 was one of their plans for a push for a one-world government. People saw this outside threat, and they ran for the government for help. That destroyed their rights, that invaded countries, that killed millions of innocent people.
A good example is around 7,000 years ago in Egypt, when the Egyptian leaders would have knowledge of the eclipse and the sun cycles. the knowledge had been handed down to them from their ancestors, and they didn't know why an eclipse would happen.